Number 11 LSU preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 61 of Good Morning College Football. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen of CFP Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. Today we have our 2024 LSU team preview. But first, if you haven't already, we very much appreciate you liking this video and subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Of course, we very much appreciate those of you who are members at CampusToCanton.com, which is the best value fantasy football membership out there, in our opinion. With a monthly rate starting at $2.99, you get instant access to premium articles, VIP Discord chat, rankings, premium tools, the first look at new tools, including brand new draft tool, which is very much in use, I can tell, in a couple of the CFF and C2C supplemental drafts that I'm currently a part of. But also team support. Reach out to the founders at Campus Canton, reach out to other contributors and bounce ideas, get quick response when you're looking for more information. We try to be as available as possible to our members, whether you are joining at the lowest price tiers, or if you are willing to give us a shot at the C2C Winning Edge or all 22 tier level, where a lot of the work that I do is available in those tiers, including our team profiles, our returning production database, which we'll be showing as we go through our LSU preview today. And also coming probably a couple of weeks away, our full 2024 stat projections, which can be used for college fantasy football, DFS, helps us to project the game totals when we do our individual game-by-game projected point spreads, all of that. So those will be available in early to mid-July as well. But let's get going with our LSU team preview. And over the last 24 hours or so, if you have been paying any attention at all to the college football internet, beside perhaps maybe the college baseball coaching carousel, which has been getting a lot of eyeballs the last several hours, the biggest topic of conversation that I've seen is the EA Sports College Football 25 toughest places to play. And of course, everybody's excited for the video game coming back, be available next month. And this week, EA Sports set up some staggered content with rankings and things like that, designed, I'm sure, to get people excited about the game, but obviously, get people talking about it. And this toughest places to play list that was released in the last 24 hours certainly got some folks excited one way or another. And part of that I saw was a lot of discussion that LSU was a bit underrated, disrespected, you might say, by being number 3 on that toughest places to play list. Death Valley ranked number 3 behind Kyle Field at Texas A&M and Bryant-Denny Stadium at Alabama. But certainly one of the most difficult environments in college football, and that's going to play into LSU's potential this year for sure, because one of the things that really jumped out to me as I was prepping for our preview today and really digging into the schedule, first of all, there's some obvious missing, top teams in that LSU schedule. But beyond that, at least the top 2 opponents that LSU will face this year, at least according to our projections, our rankings, really the top 3, I guess, are all going to be played in Baton Rouge. So that's part of the reason why, if you saw the YouTube thumbnail that called LSU the most dangerous team in the SEC, that's a big reason why. The schedule sets up really, really well. And despite LSU having some obvious, major pieces from last year's number one ranked offense missing, and of course, last year's, defense ranked 109th in defensive team performance. Despite, those questions on both sides of the ball, how are they going to replace 3 first-round NFL draft picks? How are they going to improve a defense that was, in some measures, among the very worst in the country? Nevertheless, I think LSU is well positioned and a very, very dangerous team in the SEC. So as we do on these previews, let's take a look first. What are some others saying about LSU this year? The odds makers in the market using DraftKings for these numbers have LSU number 8 in the odds to win the college football playoff, 16-1. This morning were the most up-to-date odds that I saw. So top 10 in national championship futures, but 6th in the SEC. 10-1 is LSU to win the SEC. Interesting number to me has been, what are the odds to make the college football playoff? And LSU is a team that basically, according to DraftKings, the odds makers and the market, basically 50-50. It's minus 110 for LSU, yes, to make the playoff. So that's basically, right there on the cusp, which this team being number 11 in our power rankings, as we've discussed, because of course, one of those top 12 spots is set aside for a group of 5 conference team. LSU is right there, absolutely on the bubble as far as the playoff goes, expectations-wise. Similarly, that preseason, regular season win total set at 9, and the odds are pretty close there to 50-50 on that. It's minus 120 on the over. It's even money on the under for LSU, and we'll dig into our projections, what they say about the Bayou Bengals here before long. But what are some of the other rankings out there saying? We've compiled a list of 10 or so different types of preseason rankings. Some of them are more computer-based analytics projection systems similar to our team strength power rankings. Do not take into account our opinion. So when I say, that LSU is number 11 in our preseason rankings, that has nothing to do with how I expect this LSU team to play, or how I personally expect this LSU team to finish, in their one-loss record. Similar systems that approach things that way, like Beta Rank and SP Plus, are the highest on LSU this season. Beta Rank has the Tigers 4th. SP Plus and Kelly Ford, who has a similar, forward-looking rankings and projection system, have LSU number 9. So a top 10 team, just a little bit ahead of our CFP Winning Edge team strength power rankings there. More of the kind of traditional preseason magazine. How do we expect this team to finish? The Sporting News, I would put in that bucket, has LSU 10th nationally. Athlon Sports similarly has the Tigers at number 11. ESPN's Football Power Index, more on the computer side of things, has LSU 13th. And then some of the writers, ESPN's Mark Schlabach and Andy Staples of On 3 have LSU 14th and 17th, respectively. Phil Steele has a couple of different ratings, several different ratings, but the ones that we reference for our purposes here, Steele's, top 25, top 40, whatever predicted rankings, he has LSU 19th. The Power Poll, which is more of the, who would be favored against who on a neutral field, Steele has LSU number 20. And then the first team that we have discussed through 11 of these previews, these full in-depth previews based on our preseason power rankings, Stuart Mandel of The Athletic actually has LSU out in his post-spring top 25. Was the first team mentioned as being close, honorable mention, near miss, whatever it was that he described it. But Stuart Mandel does not see LSU right now as a top 25 team. So a wide range of rankings in multiple ways of trying to project or predict the potential of this LSU team. Everything from being a top 4 team nationally all the way to be outside the top 25. So this LSU team, maybe compared to any team that we've discussed so far, maybe any team we will discuss, probably has the widest range of potential outcomes. Also, another source that we've added recently, Bruce Feldman did a prediction of his top 12, college football playoff with seeds. LSU was out on that as well. So LSU, could be a national championship contender according to some, and I do think that I'm maybe in that boat. I could see definitely a path to LSU being not just one of the most dangerous, toughest outs in the SEC, but really maybe building into a team that has the potential to, get hot at the end of the season and carry that over into the playoff and potentially end up on top if things work out. Best case scenario, of course, but also there are plenty of reasons to think, all right, maybe it won't be a super smooth transition on the offensive side of the ball, having to replace the Heisman Trophy winner, having to replace the offensive play caller who designed that number one offense and team performance last season, having to rebuild completely a wide receiver core, running back room that doesn't have a ton of depth right now, a defense that very talented on paper, but just, really, really struggled a lot last year. So on that note, taking a look at maybe the most important player for LSU this season, it's quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. And we've also referenced a few of the same sources in most of these previews. A lot of the discussion, what others are saying, is centered on quarterbacks, the quarterback position, and some folks like Bruce Feldman at The Athletic, like Jordan Reed at ESPN, have really looked at sort of the potential of these draft eligible quarterbacks. Nussmeier is certainly on that list and might not have as much written about him on these as some of the others that we've seen start for a full season or more, but pretty interesting. Some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Anonymous opposing coaches who have either faced or seen film on Garrett Nussmeier. According to Bruce Feldman, one defensive assistant who was on the opposing sideline against Nussmeier said, quote, "He was better than I thought. His accuracy was very impressive. He was putting the ball on the spot 40 to 50 yards downfield. I thought the ball jumped out of his hands. It gets out so quick to the perimeter. I think he can do some good things this year." A defensive coordinator in the SEC said, quote, "He has a lot of talent. He's not that big, maybe 6'1", but he has legit NFL arm talent. There's not a throw he can't make, and he moves pretty good, but he's such a riverboat gambler. He has to learn that not every play has to go for a touchdown." We've heard some similar things this quarterback class coming up. There seems to be a lot of that. The potential's there, the arm strength, but maybe taking too many chances, looking for too many big plays that can end up leading to turnovers. I think that for me, just on the outside looking in, maybe that's just some unfamiliarity with some of these guys that we just haven't seen a huge sample size, and Nussmeier is definitely in that boat. Speaking of, David Hale of ESPN, who tiered all 134 quarterback situations, slotted LSU and Nussmeier as being the key piece of that in tier 8, alongside teams like Kentucky, Michigan, Maryland, and North Carolina. He put it kind of in the, quote, shoes to fill category. These are going to be new starters for the most part, perhaps have some high-end potential, but plenty of questions. And as he says here, the sample sizes are small, of course, but, and reading here from Hale, in his 3 years at LSU, Nussmeier has thrown at least 10 passes in 10 games. In the first 5 of those, 2 of them being FCS opponents, he completed 58%, averaged 7.2 yards per pass, and had 3 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So obviously not great numbers there. But in that second set of 5 games, again, continuing from the piece here from Hale, a slate that includes Alabama and Georgia, he completed 63%, averaged 9.2 yards per pass, and threw 8 touchdowns with 3 picks. So Nussmeier has already shown some growth. He has not, got much as far as starting experience goes. 1 career start in the bowl game after Daniels moved on, but has played some tougher opponents and has developed into somebody who to me seems like is definitely ready to step in and take over this starting job at LSU. Final, what are they saying here? Jordan Reed of ESPN, the draft analyst, reading here from the piece, says, after serving as Jayden Daniels backup the past 2 seasons, Nussmeier took advantage of the Heisman winner sitting out the ReliaQuest Bowl, dicing up Wisconsin for 395 yards and 3 touchdown passes on 31 of 45 passing. The 6'2", 205-pound Nussmeier displayed good accuracy and touch down the field and has a clear path to LSU's QB1 spot. So Reed, some of the other observations that we passed along from him have been more, this player lacks, consistency or shows good accuracy, arm strength, blah, 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 all the more detailed aspects here. Not a lot of detail yet on Nussmeier, but the last time that we saw him, again, we use the picture in the thumbnail. He's holding the MVP trophy, threw for nearly 400 yards, looked great. Also had a great performance in the 2022 SEC championship game in a losing effort against Georgia. There were talks this time last year. I remember distinctly some people questioning whether or not Nussmeier was going to be able to beat out Jayden Daniels by the end of the year. Obviously, things turned out much, much differently. But I don't think this is just a case of, kind of the backup quarterback being the most popular player on campus in some ways. I think Garrett Nussmeier, and I'm a sucker for a coach's kid when it comes to my projection and my own personal opinion on how well I think that player will develop into a quality quarterback. And Doug Nussmeier has been on some of the great staffs in football. So I think that Garrett Nussmeier is able to tap into that a bit. I'm sure that is going to help as he continues to get more on-field experience at, the FBS, SEC level. I think the ceiling is really, really high for Garrett Nussmeier. But before we really dig into how his potential is going to potentially play out for LSU in 2024, let's take a quick look back. I'm going to be sharing the CFP Winning Edge 2024 team profiles for LSU. Scrolling down in the schedule section all the way to the bottom, we'll zoom in a little bit here. Take a look at how last season stacked up against Florida State in week 1. What was that, a Sunday night? Didn't go well. Post-game win expectancy number of 0, according to collegefootballdata.com. So if we were to play that game over 100 times, 1,000 times, on and on, we would expect LSU to never win that game. It just was not particularly close. Nevertheless, LSU was able to bounce back in a big way, understandably so, against FCS Grambling, put up 72 points in week 2, but then entered SEC play in dominant fashion, 100% post-game win expectancy in a 41-14 victory over Mississippi State. Little shaky against Arkansas. closer to a coin flip. LSU would have won that game about 2/3 of the time, but escaped with a 34-31 win over the Hogs before coming up short in a game that had actually a few percentage points higher post-game win expectancy number against Ole Miss. So the shootout, gave up 55, scored 49, come out on the losing end. But LSU bounces back and has a pretty impressive performance in that win over Missouri. That Mizzou team, by the end of the season, had obviously become one of the better teams in the SEC, enters this season with very, very high expectations, but LSU was able to take care of business and beat the Tigers, the Mizzou Tigers, on the road last season in pretty impressive fashion. Even more impressive was the dominant 30-point victory over Auburn, blanked Army 62-0. We've seen that Army team, that Army program give the Michigans and the Oklahomas of the world a real handful. Did not do that against LSU. So a pretty impressive performance there from LSU. 2 weeks later, just could not get it going against Alabama. 1% in the post-game win expectancy number, just a 2-touchdown deficit in the final score. But that was a game that Alabama, according to the numbers, statistically speaking, just really dominated that game. By the end of the year, that LSU offense was rolling. Jayden Daniels picking up steam as a Heisman Trophy candidate and favorite by the end of it. Florida allowed 52 points to this LSU offense. Then Georgia State in that Sun Belt matchup against the Sun Belt Georgia State program, 56-14 in 100% post-game win expectancy. And then LSU found a way to win against Texas A&M in a game, again, statistically speaking, we would have expected A&M to win that game far more often than not. Similarly against Wisconsin. So pretty interesting to me, looking at these post-game win expectancy numbers, that LSU certainly had one of, and frankly, the best offense in college football, according to our team performance numbers. We looked only at regular season games. We looked only at games against FBS opponents. So it does take into account that 62-0 win against Army, but it also does not take into account scoring 72 against Grambling. So it's not, padding those stats too much. Also doesn't include Garrett Nussmeier's MVP performance against Wisconsin. Nevertheless, this LSU team, if you look at, adding up all those post-game win expectancy numbers, putting a percentage of a full win to those percentages, to where they would get one full win against Grambling, 0.64 wins against Arkansas, 0.68 wins against Ole Miss, all the way down at the end where they had 2 wins below 50%. You look it up, and LSU is just shy of 9 full wins. So this 10-3 LSU team, statistically speaking, might have deserved to be more of a 9-4 or possibly even 8-5 team. So getting to 10 wins, you could say that this team overachieved a little bit what we saw statistically speaking. And part of that, I'm sure, was the defense, because again, looking at the numbers from last season, regular season only, and FBS opponents only, you can see that statistically speaking, this LSU defense was perhaps one of the worst in college football. From a points per game scoring margin, 86th nationally. But if you dig even deeper, yards per play allowed, points per drive against, yards per pass attempt, success rate against, and then our EPA per play equivalent, we use College Football Data's PPA numbers for that, all in the triple digits on the national rankings. Things like points per drive, which come from Brian Fremeau, bcftoys.com, are filtered for garbage time. LSU 121st nationally in that number, the EPA number 126. But with that elite offense, number one in scoring, number one in yards per play, number 2 points per drive, number 1 yards per pass attempt at 11.1, number 2 in success rate, well over 50% there, and then number 1 in EPA per play. It ends up working out that this LSU team played close to a top 25 level overall, even with one of those worst, those just terrible defensive numbers, category by category. But all together, that LSU offense, which was both explosive and efficient, ended up finishing number 1 in our offensive team performance numbers, both passing and rushing. So obviously number 1 overall. Defensively, 109th overall, 113th against the pass, 122nd against the run. That is going to have to be much, much better. Returning production-wise, how does this LSU team stack up compared to 2023? Sharing my screen here for the CFP Winning Edge returning production database. LSU ranked 64th nationally, roughly FBS average, 12th in the SEC, but overall not bad. We've said it plenty for teams like Georgia and Ohio State. If you recruit at an elite level, being FBS average is better than most years, because a team like LSU consistently loses players early to the NFL draft. If you look at just the raw numbers, LSU would have ranked 61st in returning production based only on who walked out of the door after last season, whether it's leaving for the NFL, whether it's just running out of eligibility or transferring out. So overall, not bad for LSU. Adjusting for incoming transfers, LSU lost just a little bit of ground overall, but those raw offensive numbers are down at 92nd, and defensively, actually a little bit of a bright spot, perhaps, if you think that LSU is going to improve defensively based on a fairly large percentage of those players returning from last year. LSU was 28th in raw defensive returning production, 40th when you adjust for incoming transfers. The loss of Jayden Daniels is big. Numbers wise, he was just as good as it gets, basically, right? Heisman Trophy winner, 3,800 plus yards passing, 11.7 yards per pass attempt is just, one of the best that we will see. That is an excellent number. 40-4 touchdown to interception ratio, but also Jayden Daniels, incredibly productive running the football as well. Every time he took off and had some space, just glided down the field. 135 rushing attempts, averaged nearly 8.5 yards per carry, had double-digit touchdowns, and finished with over 1,100 rushing yards. The rushing production as a whole for LSU has a lot to work on. That was an area where, outside of Daniels, they struggled a little bit to consistently run the football. Logan Diggs ended his season with a torn ACL, unfortunately, is transferred to Ole Miss. He was the leading rusher among running backs last season with 653 yards and 7 touchdowns. Josh Williams is back, consistently underrated, underappreciated perhaps, but as of right now, according to what we heard coming out of spring, still was getting, number 1 running back snaps in the vast majority of practices. He has 284 yards on 55 carries last season, 5 touchdowns. Caleb Jackson, most would say, has a much higher ceiling, probably could be considered the favorite to be the leading rusher for LSU this season. He saw the end zone 4 times, but just 31 carries, 165 yards there. The addition of John Emery, or not the addition, the retention, I suppose, of John Emery, junior, former 5-star recruit who just, hasn't consistently been able to get on the field, entered the transfer portal late, but withdrew after spring practice. Add some depth to that room, which really needs it. They're going to rely on those top 2 running backs. I would have expected quite a bit. They were the only 2 scholarship running backs on campus for spring practice, as we discussed a lot this spring. There's some legal uncertainty about Trey Holly's future, but wouldn't necessarily expect him to be an impact player this year. Regardless, between Williams, Jackson, and now Emery for some added depth, think that there's a decent nucleus there at LSU to hopefully be a little bit more productive running the football, because Nussmeier, even though, as that opposing coach said, can move a little bit, is not nearly as dynamic of a runner as Jayden Daniels. So that's going to look a little bit different offensively. The receiving core was an even bigger, just a little bit more under construction, we'll say. Malik Neighbors, one of, if not, you can make an argument that Plenty did, that he was the best receiver in college football last season. Over 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns, big plays through the air. Brian Thomas, 17 touchdowns. He was also a first-round draft pick. So you're losing over 200 targets between those two, over 150 almost 160 receptions between these two 1,000-yard receivers, double-digit touchdowns. You just don't really replace players like that very easily. Kyron Lacey, kind of a late bloomer on the high school level, started his college career at Louisiana, transfers to LSU. Seems like he's in line to be that top target. Consistently coming out of spring, we kept hearing a lot of positive things about Kyron Lacey, about the expectation that he will be the number one target for LSU this season. But then from there, it's a little bit murky. There was a lot of positive about Chris Hilton Jr., who did consistently, take reps with the number one wide receiver room coming out of spring practice. And then Aaron Anderson was kind of that third player, former LSU signee, didn't get on the field a ton. There was a little bit of a viral video last season after the game with Alabama, where Nick Saban said, hey, you'd be playing a lot more here than you are there. But right now, Anderson seems like he has maybe the lead on that third starting wide receiver spot entering fall camp. But me personally, and based on what I saw last season from him at Liberty, CJ Daniels, I think, is likely to emerge, as a starter at LSU. I think that his big play potential, his ability to go up and get the football is just going to end up winning out. The numbers were excellent last season, 19.5 yards per catch, 10 touchdowns on 55 receptions. I believe that he's going to emerge over the course of the season as maybe the number two wide receiver there for LSU is my personal expectation. So we do have Daniels actually slotted in as a starter in our projected depth charts at CFP Winning Edge, as we'll discuss, even though he was not really breaking into that starting rotation in spring practices. Tight end Mason Taylor, I think, has the potential certainly to be an all-SEC player at that position. Probably, an even higher ceiling. Speaking long term, I'm a big Mason Taylor fan specifically. That LSU offensive line, really, really experienced. Will Campbell is on a lot of people's way too early 2025 NFL draft, first round mocks, maybe the number one offensive lineman in college football heading into this season. Garrett Dellinger's played a bunch of different positions. He's back after being a full-time starter at left guard last year. Miles Frazier, full-time starter, back as well. Emory Jones, who, like Will Campbell, was an all-SEC performer. It's really on the high side as far as full-time experience coming back for LSU. Defensively is the major issue, right? My good buddy, longtime CFP Winning Edge podcast co-host Xavier Trish has a saying. I don't know if he made it up, he heard it somewhere else, but it's pretty common whenever we're talking returning production, especially for units that really struggled last season. He says, you know what? Old garbage just stinks more. So if you got a large chunk of a unit coming back from last season when they just were, frankly, bad, bringing a bunch of them back isn't always a great thing. But I do think that as we get into the LSU roster, how they stack up roster strength-wise, raw talent, there's some productive pieces in here as well. I think that this LSU defense is going to be much improved. Not sure it's going to play, at a top 25 level, but I do think that we're going to see, a big step forward. Getting leading tackler Major Burns back, Greg Penn, and the linebacker core, that's nice. But Harold Perkins, All-American freshman, can be one of the top pass rushers in college football. Had 24 pressures last season, but will he? What role will he play? There's been plenty of discussion. New defensive coordinator Blake Baker wants to put him in the position to not only succeed personally, but put that LSU defense in its best, setup to be able to defend and show improvement. So though Perkins might be, most productive, maybe coming off the edge, he is a little light. Also, maybe his long-term future is at linebacker as well, which is worth considering. So plenty of discussion yet to be had on what's the best way to use Harold Perkins. I don't necessarily have, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I think Baker is, well equipped to make that decision. But just as far as a single player, the talent he possesses, and production that we've seen so far this year, he certainly has the potential to be one of the best in college football. So there's experience coming back in the back seven. You can see Whit Weeks, Cy Alexander, Sage Ryan back as well. But the defensive line, that was the major concern entering spring practices. The loss of Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo, as much as that unit struggled, especially against the run, the interior defensive line had a lot of talent. Smith and Wingo, both NFL draft picks, left school early. And that was a major area that LSU needed to attack in the transfer portal. And they did, as we'll see here in just a second. Getting back to those team profiles, how does this LSU roster stack up? How does the depth chart look on paper? On the offensive side of the ball, of course, Garrett Nussmeier slotted in. He's going to be the starter. He's, if you can see there, I'll zoom in a little bit. Looking at our video game ratings, our overall individual player ratings, that should be somewhat similar to those EA Sports College Football 25 player ratings, overall ratings. Nussmeier is an 87, pretty good for a first-time starter for a full season at quarterback, based on being a highly rated recruit coming out of high school, but hasn't had a ton of opportunities just yet. 18 games, yes, but only one start. Was able to put up just one production point, where we try to supplement those player ratings that we do adjust for experience, and then add production to try to help if a player is underrated coming out of high school, try to build up that rating through on-field production, but also an opportunity to sort of separate, all right, who's capitalizing perhaps on that potential based on early playing time or just opportunities and overall who's the better players in college football. We try to use our production points to help capture that. Garrett Nussmeier hasn't had a lot of opportunities yet, so he hasn't been able to build on those numbers. But maybe mid-season, we look back at this, and Garrett Nussmeier is a 92, 93. If he's able to, carry over the momentum that he had from the bowl game, put up a few 300-yard passing numbers, maybe SEC Player of the Week, things like that. We'll add some production points to his numbers there. Similar for Kyron Lacey. Like I said, underrated player coming out, but expectations are very, very high for him. If you look from, a college fantasy football perspective, Lacey is somebody that at the very early bit of the offseason, perhaps the excitement around CJ Daniels was a little higher, but Lacey pretty quickly, became the most likely expected top target there at LSU. Based on the spring reports, he was consistently consistent as that top target as a starter, and really looks almost cemented as that top option. I did mention, even though CJ Daniels right now has not really emerged in practices as a starter, I think he will be fairly early in the season. Chris Hilton seems like he is maybe going to be that number 3. This is not based on specific positions. That is something maybe we'll have a little bit of time to dig deeper into that once all of our stat projections and all that are done. Maybe I'll be able to, in August, once we start getting some depth charts, a little bit more of, okay, who's playing X, Y, Z, what now, maybe then we might tweak these a little bit to try to truly outline who is starting and at what position. But this is more of a, all right, these are who I think are going to be the three most impactful receivers. Might not necessarily be the three who end up, specifically taking that first snap of the week 1 season. But as you can see, a ton of experience on the offensive line. 4 full-time starters are back, and a lot of talent there with Will Campbell and Emory Jones as the bookends. We've got DJ Chester, the redshirt freshman, as the projected starter there at center. I believe that's in line with what we saw this spring. Defensively, this is sort of the, this other than Nussmeier is the big question for LSU, because if you were looking at these roster strength numbers, which in my opinion are some of the best things that we do, a little bit different than most of the other projection systems out there, we're able to, based on those raw talent numbers, players coming out of high school or transfer ratings, adjust them for experience and career production and put a number on how strong is this roster on paper. That LSU defense is number 5 in the country in roster strength. So this should be, or could be, one of the best defenses in college football, just purely looking at it on paper. Of course, that is not how it played out last season. And so there's really little evidence to suggest that this will be a top 5 or top 10 or even top 25 defense this season. But the potential is there. And if Blake Baker is as good of a defensive coordinator as he has looked at times, especially if he can get his hands on, this level of talent, we should see a significant jump in team performance this year. Offensively, I think that we are a little bit underrating this LSU level of talent. 37th in roster strength seems quite low, honestly, to me. And part of that is, Nussmeier just not a ton of experience. Lacey maybe a little bit underrated. And a little bit of lack of experience and production opportunity so far at the running back position. And last year, didn't really run as much, at least out of the, handed off to the running backs. But getting back to how does this defense shake out? A lot of new faces up front. LSU did go after interior defensive linemen pretty heavily in the transfer portal. Gio Hayes is one of those. J.Bar Suggs, a transfer from the Division II level. LSU did miss out on some big name interior defensive linemen. There were a couple of headlines certainly about Brian Kelly and sort of how he was treating or willing to or not get into all the NIL stuff in pursuing some of those bigger name interior defensive linemen. But still consistently a pretty talented group. Adding Dominic McKinley, 5-star, true freshman. Certainly think he'll be an impact player early on in his career. I think we see a much better LSU defense than what ranked 106 last season in our D-line performance numbers. The linebacker group could certainly be one of the better duos in college football. Harold Perkins Jr. and Greg Penn III. Again, kind of depends a little bit on how those players are used. Perkins, especially on passing downs, likely to come off the edge a bit more, I would expect. But then there's also experience in the secondary as well. And, as far as raw numbers go, the secondary was certainly the level of the defense that got the most attention, or they were able to add talent and depth through the transfer portal. The addition of Jordan Gilbert, who have projected to start at safety, Austin Osbury, J.R. Brown as well. Hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more from J.K. Johnson after he missed last season due to injury, and then Zy Alexander, who suffered an injury last season as well. But in terms of raw talent, this LSU defense is, I mean, it's got the potential to be a really, really solid defensive unit, but certainly didn't play like it last year. But you can see here, when I talk raw talent, usually I'm referring to this left-hand column here, 247 rating. We're looking at average rating in the 247 composite. And on the LSU defense, I mean, top 15 on the defensive line, 11th at linebacker, top 10 nationally in DBs. Should be much, much better. Offensively, not quite as high, round by round, position by position, but a top 5 offensive line as far as raw talent goes. A great, great building block for this LSU defense. And then I do think that, certainly there are some questions at the offensive skill positions. A lot of, inexperience, but the potential is certainly there. So how will it all work out as far as our on-field projections? And this is, to me, the real potential wild card for LSU. No Georgia, no Texas, right? Playing Alabama, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma all at home. Certainly, it's a fairly tough non-conference schedule with 2 Power 4 opponents, but USC and UCLA both undergoing quite a bit of change. Those all are winnable games. We have LSU favored in each of the first 5 games this season, including the SEC opener against South Carolina, a South Alabama team that's certainly dangerous. Blew out Oklahoma State last season, but much, much different USA team this year. Changes it. The coaching staff, head coach moved on. Kane Womack now going to be defensive coordinator at Alabama. New quarterback, lost their top running back and wide receiver as well. So that should be a game LSU is going to be favored, like we have here, by more than 3 touchdowns. Get the week off prior to hosting Ole Miss, I think, is key. Ole Miss number 5 in our preseason power rankings, and we do have the Rebels as a favorite in that game, but that is absolutely a winnable matchup for LSU. Back-to-back road games at Arkansas and at that number 1 toughest place to play, Kyle Field, according to College Football 25, is a tough situation. That is sort of maybe the sneakiest, most difficult 2-week stretch on this schedule, in my opinion. Do get a week to prepare for Alabama as usual. That game also in Baton Rouge, of course, is key. Have to go to the Swamp the following week, which most years is going to be just a very, very difficult situation. But this year, what does that Florida team look like by week 10? Have they moved on at head coach? Has the team quit after going through the toughest schedule in college football up to that point, and including that matchup with LSU there? That one, LSU could very much be the beneficiary of that Florida squad just being beat up and maybe tapped out by that point in the season. Get Vanderbilt at home, should be a nice tune-up for the regular season finale, also at home against an Oklahoma team who we've already discussed is higher in our power rankings. All 3 teams that are higher in our team strength power rankings than LSU all must travel to Baton Rouge. So the numbers in our projected win totals, similar to those second order wins, the way we do it, the projected percentage based on those point spreads, you get 0.7 wins for USC, 0.96 for Nichols, 0.72 for South Carolina, on and on. Tally them all up, and we have this LSU team going 8-4. So clearly under the 9 win total that is at DraftKings right now. But me personally, I'm a little bit more optimistic about LSU. Certainly, there are losable games. LSU could lose to USC, could lose to Texas A&M, could lose to Florida, but we expect that LSU being the favorite in those games and also having an opportunity to win all 3 games in which we've got the Tigers as underdogs. I don't know. This LSU team certainly could, I think, win 10 games. I think that they could challenge for an SEC title, and do think, even if they end up 9-3, that might be a good enough resume to sneak into the college football playoff, depending, of course, on what else happens. But I definitely think that a 9-3 LSU squad, even with a manageable schedule, could potentially get one of those, lower seeds, and by that time, especially if things have started to pick up momentum with Nussmeier really coming into his own in the second half of his first full season as a starter, that running back situation shakes itself out. Caleb Jackson really starts to emerge as the dynamic playmaker at that position. If that wide receiver core, especially if CJ Daniels is stepping up and maybe growing into his potential as a big play wide receiver, if that offensive line develops truly into one of the best in college football, and if that defense, maybe they're not quite gelled completely at the beginning of the season, but by the end of the year, that talent and sort of the familiarity as they get going with Blake Baker calling the plays and designing that defense, maybe we do see, this LSU team grow and mature and evolve, that maybe in week 1, we don't see, what looks like a playoff caliber team, or maybe even an SEC championship contender, or potentially national championship contender. But I'm optimistic that by the end of the year, it'll be a much better LSU team. Will they be able to navigate, win enough games to still be in position to play their way into the college football playoff? We'll of course have to see. Our updated win total projection, you might have heard me discuss this prior, that 7.99 projected wins. That is officially what we've got for LSU. We are officially on the under. That is the number that in the process that we've used dating back to 2021, where we project every FBS win total. We have a 60.4% success rate in that situation. Last season, we were 55.6%. I'm comfortable with those numbers, feel pretty good about that. Being in the high 50s or low 60s, feel like is a pretty good place to be. However, there is certainly room for improvement. Wanted to give ourselves a chance maybe to not be on every over on the lowest teams, not be on every under on the highest teams. So giving a 10% of a win bonus if you are favored in a matchup, a 10% penalty if you're an underdog. LSU favored in 9, underdog in 3, that gets +6. So we can't get all the way to 9, but get much, much closer if we add that, +6 bonus to get to 8.59. So again, 8.59 rounds up to 9, 9-3 LSU, I think has a pretty good shot of getting in the college football playoff. And then, by the end of the season, that defense is improved, that offense has really come together. This LSU team might just be a really, really dangerous team to face in that playoff. So that will do it for us today. We will be back on Friday discussing team number 12 in our preseason team strength power rankings at CFP Winning Edge. And until then, please do consider giving this video a like. Please do subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, please consider signing up at campus2canton.com. You can try us out for as little as $2.99 per month. It's a great value. Get access to the Discord, get access to our rankings, content, wide range of tools. But then also, if you like what you saw as far as the team profiles go and returning production, and then also the stat projections, gave a little bit of a sneak peek on Monday in our Alabama team preview. That is all available to our all 22 and C2C winning edge tier members. Got a question, a comment here. I missed it earlier. My apologies, Justin. Comment, what are my thoughts on Xavier Thomas transfer coming in from Mississippi State? I personally am not sure to answer that. There was some positive buzz in spring practice, but he was always kind of listed right there with CJ Daniels as somebody that could maybe emerge as a starter, but hadn't really made a move up the depth chart just yet. Things could change, certainly. Get the whole summer throwing session going. If he and Nussmeier really start to develop a rapport, that could absolutely turn into the potential for him to make a major impact. Didn't put up great numbers last year at Mississippi State. Had 279 routes run, 58 targets, 40 catches, 503 yards, just one touchdown. So that kind of skewed things a little bit. But somebody that certainly has experience, has SEC experience, and should very much be in the rotation. I should have mentioned him when we were talking about LSU receivers. My expectations aren't super high, but absolutely think that he will be, maybe wide receiver 4 or 5 to start, but could emerge as a starter. Just not sure that he has number one target type potential. Like Lacey is sort of the player to beat there, in my opinion. But CJ Daniels, I think, is a player who can has maybe greater potential to get there more quickly than Xavier Thomas. So thanks for that question. Sorry I didn't get to it earlier, but we very much appreciate it. And appreciate those of you who are tuning in live or catching a replay on the Campus Canton YouTube channel. Please do like, please do subscribe. And until Friday, have a great week and take care.